Welcome to Filmwax Radio, the independent film talk show. Every week we're visited by filmmakers, actors, journalists, programmers, and others to sit down and chat about the state of independent film. Today my guest is filmmaker Jonathan Caouette, best known for his 2003 award-winning autobiographical documentary Tarnation, a montage of home movies, video, and photos Jonathan took while growing up outside Houston, Texas. It's an utterly original movie that really looked like nothing else that came before it. Critics like to focus on the fact that Caouette made Tarnation for a couple of $100 using iMovie, but it's just further proof that great storytelling cannot be calculated in dollars and cents. In Tarnation, we're introduced to Jonathan's mom, Renee, with whom he has a complicated relationship. In and out of hospitals due to mental illness, Renee was unable to raise Jonathan, and for the most part, he was brought up by his maternal grandparents, Rosemary and Adolph. Jonathan's latest film, Away Renee, which I just recently saw at BAM Cinema Fest and got to meet Jonathan, might feel familiar to those who have seen Tarnation. While the new film definitely explores some similar terrain, its primary focus is in the here and now, as Jonathan rescues his mom from a facility in Houston and brings her up to New York so they can live closer together. It's essentially a road movie. It may sound intensely dramatic, but it's also filled with much humor and love. So I am very happy to welcome Jonathan Caouette to Filmwax Radio.
Hi, Filmwax. It's nice to be here.
We're here with you and a cat who's licking itself.
That's Baber.
Baber?
B-A-B-E-R, Baber.
How did you arrive at that, at a name like Baber?
David, my boyfriend who lives across the street from here, came up with the name about 15 years ago. Oh, no, wait, 12 years ago. Is the reason David doesn't live here, just go right to the personal real quick? Is it because of the albums and the dogs? It's the albums, books, DVDs, and Betamax tapes. And just the barrage of stuff. It's the whole pack rat thing. And probably if you just hear the audio about this, it probably sound, if I go full tilt boogie into talking about this, it probably sounds like, I'm a hoarder or something, which I am, I suppose, on some level, but it's not to the magnitude that you think it may be, or how that TV show is.
Oh, no, definitely not.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm sitting on, let's take a step back. We're in your home doing the show today remotely because of the new studio for BBox is in the works. Should be very available soon, but this is great. And I'm sitting on a couch which is about, I'd say, 10 feet long. It's a sectional couch which must be pieced together because there's no other way you could have gotten here. And
you can do anything with these couches. You can shape-shift them. You can put them all together and make one big, like Russ Meyer kind of situation with a big bed with a bunch of ladies on it if you want.
Yeah.
You could take them, you could line them up, all in front of each other, and then you could watch a movie on this movie screen, which I'll show you in just a few minutes.
Oh, yeah, please. Oh, yeah. Wow.
Do you remember Picture from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood? Picture?
I don't remember Picture. Lady Elaine comes to mind, and King Friday.
Picture was like the precursor to going to the neighborhood of make believe, and he would say Picture.
Oh, right.
And then he would it was just a picture frame, and the camera would zoom in on it, and then a Super 8 film would start. That was some sort of like
early.
This is where we're going. I don't know where I get these memories from.
Well, you have a you were visual. Right from the beginning.
And I have useless pop culture stuff in my head.
But that's because you're visual, and so much of pop culture is either visual or, of course, or oral. But it's like,
it's true.
But you were from your childhood. For anyone who has seen Tarnation knows, you were taking home movies. You were fixated on that, so it doesn't really come as a surprise. I mean, that that stuff would have stayed inside your head.
It stays. It's there, and it's looped, unfortunately. And it's there so much that sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and actually ponder the idea that we're, or start to question the whole idea that we're actually in 2012, which is weird.
In what way?
I don't know. I don't know if this is an approaching 40 something. Well, approaching 40. not something yet, but approaching 40, being 39 now. I don't know, and I don't know if you had gone through this, or if you knew anybody that had gone through this, but the passage of time is so askewed when you're in your late 30s. It's indescribable. It's so strange. Like just like going from one day to the next day to the next day. I don't seem to measure time in the same way that I used to.
Very true. But I don't know what you were referring to earlier by saying that I should have known. Would I have known this? What it was like to turn 40? I mean, no, I'm getting very close to 50. It's true.
And you don't look a day past 31.
Hey,
which is great.
8 years younger than the last reference.
And I'm not blowing smoke either. I have no reason to. You look great.
I appreciate it, and you look great.
Thank you.
It's also, by the way, I saw Tarnation. I was working in a Sony in the music industry in a cog in a kind of cartel job, and a guy that I worked with named Roy, he came up and he said, come to see this movie with me at the Cinema Village. And I said, I never heard of this, but I went with him, and I was like so glad I did. And so it was for me. Years have gone by and then I saw Walk Away. To then know you and to meet you, it's kind of like a weird thing too. I don't know, people. It's very odd.
When I was making this film, I wasn't. I don't think it was. It wasn't really intending to be a film in sort of the traditional film way that where I was anticipating people. And this was initially making it. I had never really anticipated people sitting in a formal theater watching this as a film. I think it was originally going to be it was definitely everything that's in the film now, but it was also juxtaposed with a lot more impressionistic elements to it. Tons of moments that probably should have resided in some sort of an art gallery setting, or could have been part of a mixed media installation. So the fact that talking about Tarnation, so the fact that it was culled down from, was made on my iMac computer and was 2.5 hours running time, and then was culled down from that to 88 minutes and had gone to a 35 millimeter print in 2004 is astonishing to me still to think about. And what's amazing to me even moreover is I don't know if, had I made Tarnation today in 2012, if anyone would have batted, two eyes at it. I don't think people would have been concerned about the film as much as they seemed to be in 2004 when it had come out.
Talking with Jonathan Caouette, whose new movie Walk Away Renee, it was recently at BAM Cinema Fest, is now on Sundance Now. Just coming back to that though. What do you owe to that no one, when you say no one really would bat an eye to this now?
I think when it was made, this was before the onset of YouTube, and before people I think were as engulfed into the internet and plugged into the internet and into gadgets, and as they are now. And so I think in a lot of ways, if you were to see, I can be pretty self-deprecating, so just throw a rock at me if I just sound like I'm slapping myself too unnecessary. But I feel like with the onset of YouTube, aspects of what you see in Tarnation these days is a little passé, but I could be totally wrong. Am I wrong? I bet I am wrong. Maybe I'm right.
I think you're underestimating the gifts that come, that maybe feel a little easier because they exist in your fiber, and also because you're just sort of used to, practicing it for so many years.
Yeah.
I think that what's lost on a lot is storytelling. Now you have I thought you were going to go with the reality television and certainly social media
for sure.
We put our videos up all the time, and we can edit things together. Yeah, it's very true, but
you can edit things on your phone.
Doesn't mean you're going to have an emotionally powerful experience watching all this stuff.
This is true.
And now a lot of entertainment is just editing is where the storytelling is being done.
Right.
I mean, that's a little cynical. I think there are many, many, many exceptions, and I feel like it's part of the pleasure of what I'm doing is I can help people like find out about Away Renee
Absolutely.
in my little way.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for making it.
Thank you.
Do you have a problem with my referring to Renee as mentally ill?
No, not at all. I mean, I think it's a way for people who are outside of a situation like this, who to make sense of it on some level, or to be able to call it something. I'm a little ambivalent about the whole notion of mental illness, to be honest. On one hand, I'll refer to her as being mentally ill, because I think that's a quick way of other people understanding what that may be and what possibly could surround saying something like that about somebody is. And on the other hand, I often think that I've sort of begun to believe this as I've gotten older, that people with mental illnesses are actually, certainly I think they're hardwired differently than most people are. But I do believe that they're definitely sort of accessing another place, for sure. And and then I kind of go off in my mind's eye about the whole idea about the possibility of Meral, parallel realities, and the multiverse and all that kind of stuff. And even though I think about it and think about it on even a more general sense, I definitely believe that there's something to be said and thought out more about that. And I think that people that suffer from mental illnesses are probably somewhere else, and almost like they're almost half knocked out of their body, but they're accessing this other place that has a different language, and while they're accessing that, the way it's being re-reflected to us, the way it's being re-rendered out to us, looks so wacky, and I don't know. I think we're going to know a lot more about what that is maybe 100 years from now, if the world is around.
It also is difficult because we perceive them as suffering. These folks, we perceive them as suffering, and that's really a hard thing to really think about. And
for sure,
and it distances us also on some level from.
There's a lot of fear involved. I have two MOs for the film. One is to hopefully have created two pieces of work that will allow people to hopefully have more empathy for mentally ill people, and then the other one is in some way, shape, or form to hopefully remind people that we live and die. And I hope to continue to make films that that remind people of that in some way, shape, or form.
Jonathan, did this experience with your mom make you a better parent?
I don't know about that so much. I have good days and bad days with my son Josh, but I think in general, I think I'm a lot more empathetic to things, and a lot more, probably more hypersensitive to things that maybe other parents may not be. I don't know. Who knows? But definitely knowing like what I had gone through, and feeling like I was able to sort of duck certain nuances of trauma, and sort of like, because I had gone through quite a bit of junk as a kid, and I think I could, being given that set of cards and those set of circumstances, I probably could have gone in any number of directions. I could have done anything, and I think, I don't know if it had to do with me being gay, or if it, or wanting, or what it had to do with, but I definitely think, and this is going to sound really sappy too, but I think cinema in a lot of ways, and my love for cinema, sort of saved my life in some ways. And I don't know what I would have done if had cinema not existed, or music for that matter too, because music for me is also a very integral part of the work I do as well. I incorporate music vastly into all the films I've made so far.
I'm gonna say the reason I asked that question is also because, the closer you got to your mom, as you matured, and the more your role became sort of as her caretaker. But part of that was your choice. You could have just sort of allowed the facilities to do what they didn't. But
completely, yeah.
I mean, you can't almost blame some people for going that sort of gravitating that way, or maybe you can. Right. But what I noticed is you're having taken on learning so much from a medical standpoint, about all the drugs and exactly how her mind works, and being able to also learn how to talk to the medical community. Right. It was very evident that you probably had, maybe stumbled a few times, but you learned how to best effectively communicate with those people and the amount of bureaucracy you had to deal with.
Sure. And there's a whole cacophony of things that involves too, because you're pretty privy to you're the first one that's actually brought up the whole idea of how to talk to the medical community, because there's so many levels to why it's imperative to be able to talk to the medical community efficiently. But I mean, that's a whole other conversation. But there were periods where I needed to sort of come up for air and save myself in a lot of ways. And she had there were periods where she did have to go to assisted living facilities for a little while, because it was just a lot to handle. And there were periods where I had her and my grandfather here simultaneously, and it's a constant battle with me, because I'm a pretty big advocate for not wanting to see people institutionalized. So I was constantly trying to sort of save everybody, and that meant bringing them into my home, financially expending myself, and after a while, and it's not about like I wasn't trying to be a saint or anything like that. It was just like, this is my family. These are the people that raised me. They're hardwired in a very special way. This is the circumstance, and there's nobody else that's going to help them in the way that I could probably help them. And, and I have to say my grandfather, just on a real personal note, my grandfather had been doing very, very well here for a while. For the most part, I was taking care of him, but David and I were both taking care of him. But then it just sort of got to a point to where we couldn't take care of him, and he wasn't really safe because we couldn't take care of him, and our schedule started getting out of control, and we just weren't able to do it. We couldn't afford anybody to come into the house or anything like that. So we had to put him in I had to put him into a nursing home in Texas, and no sooner than 4 months after he had gone into a nursing home, his health began to subside, and then he passed away. He died in a nursing home for the most part, and it was terrible. And I think I will forever be sort of guilt-ridden by that. Like I often tell myself, or think to myself, that if had circumstances been a little bit different, if there were a different infrastructure here, he probably could have still been alive.
No, it's a lot to.
Anyway, it's just a lot.
It's a lot to bear.
Yeah. It's like Cyndi Lauper says, money changes everything.
If you have the money to spend on have these options,
I think so.
Is that what you mean?
If you just have a better sort of financial situation, lives can be saved. Things can be a little more comfortable, but it's hard to do that when you're an independent filmmaker. Sometimes John Waters said, if you want to be an independent filmmaker, and make money off of it, you should become a plumber. Which is true.
So you were. I noticed in interviews that there's a certain amount of self-consciousness yeah, you're getting a little right. You're getting some of any criticism. Let's say criticism is about that you're returning to the well. So it's not that I don't think you have to address that. I'm more interested in, why. How is that criticism? It's like there are many filmmakers and storytellers who return to a subject because there's more to say about it on some whatever level.
I mean, that's clearly. I mean, I could go on and on about the criticisms of this film. I have to say that a lot of the primary criticisms came out just before the Cannes Film. Well, just as the Cannes Film Festival version came out. The press has been quite cool since then, for the most part. It hasn't been like,
and that was a work in progress, right?
It was a work in progress, and I'm really grateful that Cannes was able to show it as a work in progress. There were a myriad of things that were different about that version. The structure was told non-linearly. It was being told backwards.
Oh, right. You were started off
like irreversible sort of memento way that I think only worked for those films. But I think we gave it a good try for that version. And there was also a whole other sort of fictional subplot that was completely carved out of the Cannes version that involved a fictitious cult called the Cloudbusters. And that's gone, which I'm really, really glad that's gone. But I'm glad the film has sort of like evolved to where it is now. But in terms of like why I made it, I guess a lot of it was probably just out of compulsion for knowing that the footage was now in a form of just zeros and ones. I'm giving you the short version of this, but it was, just all this footage sort of residing on my external hard drives, knowing that, a Sprite could spill on it one day and that would sort of be the end of it. So a lot of it was just sort of made out of happenstance, circumstance, and it wasn't made out of the narcissism. It wasn't made out of the catharsis and the sort of sense of urgency that Tarnation was made out of. It was sort of, I was like, well, I have all of this other footage, and it was going to, my original idea for a lot of the backstory that was in Away Renee was going to hopefully be repurposed or reorganized in a way that, to where it could sort of live on as a DVD extra. On a 2014 re-release of Tarnation or maybe a 20-year anniversary of the film. But now it's a part of this film in 2012. The Road movie, though, was sort of the original sort of crux of the idea of making a new film, and it wasn't even necessarily going to be a follow-up to Tarnation, but it was just going to be a sort of new film with my mother and myself, very, very experimental, extreme cinema verite, elongated shots. I had seen a lot of Bellatar films prior to thinking about making Away Renee, and I went to this extreme verite film festival back in 2009 in Warsaw. And I was lucky enough to be
sounds like a fucking nightmare.
It's a fucking
no, I mean
nightmare.
Extreme verite and Warsaw in the same sentence. I'm sorry. I'm sure it was actually quite delightful.
It was cool.
I'm sure it was.
No, it was good. I was a
Bellatar. Wow. I just don't even see any scars on your wrists after that. But that would have been. Long takes.
I didn't know. I knew
Is that what's called? The Long Takes Festival?
It was the Long Takes Film Festival. And, subsequently there were a lot of long take movies that started popping out of the woodworks that were great.
Yeah.
But I felt like I saw just a whole Nipsey Russell of them. I saw 15 of them in succession. And I was a judge for these films, with like 5 other people, and they were very extreme verite, but they were very inspiring. I loved I was really excited about this was the first time I became aware that we were probably in a very sort of post MTV generation thing was happening, and I was really excited about that, because I felt like people were. There was some hope for people being able to sort of reappreciate cinema again on some level, even if that meant to to dial everything back down and to slow everything back down again. I don't know if we've quite gotten the balance right with most films these days, but anyway, so the idea was to make this road movie with my mom and myself, and just to sort of endure the mundaneness of it, and see perhaps by chance if there may be some inherent conflict that could arise upon doing this road trip.
I won't give away the one of the key events that happens early on, but it adds a lot of tension to the film and makes sort of that what you just described go easier cinematically speaking, because you realized, oh my goodness, this could just, now this road movie could go anywhere because of what happens, but we won't give it away. People should see it. And also, I'm sure a lot of people are curious. How much is Renee involved in the final? Like how much is developed? Like how much of I know I've heard that she definitely is all very very supportive of what you're doing, and she's glad. Does she think what is her take on that?
I think there's a big window in her that is very grateful that her son is a storyteller and a filmmaker, and that kind of goes along with her constantly wanting to tell the story of her life and her personal circumstances to many people all of the time. So to have these films that I think she can and then for me myself to have these films to sort of save us the conversation of having to talk about all the sordid details, or maybe not even sordid details, but just sort of explaining what this all is, so that maybe it would make some sense on some level, or explain a few things. I've made these two films, and I think she's super cool with it. She loves that her story is getting out there, and I'm really excited about the idea of segueing into making narrative fictional films, and I think she really has a pretty great, amazing screen presence. Severed from the documentary truth of like what her story is, like aside from all of that, I mean, I think is just a person who. And this is from the sort of filmmaker objective, totally schizophrenic talking about this, because I'm talking about my mom and these very very personal circumstances. But just as a filmmaker, I think she's a great actress too. I think in some ways, and she has an amazing screen presence. And I'd love to put her in I'd love to have her perhaps do a small role in a fictitious film one day.
It is very true.
She really leaves herself alone very well in front of the camera, more so than I had, particularly in this film. And there's really something great to be said about that. It's, like all filmmakers, we're truth junkies. I mean, some of us are anyway. And she gives so much, too much sometimes, I think, but.
Thank you thanks a lot.
Thank you.
for making today happen. Well, it was a
fluke.
It was kind of a fluke, but it was a good fluke, the best possible fluke. So, thanks again for coming on Filmwax Radio. Once again, Away Renee is on demand on Sundance Now. And are there other ways to see the film?
Well, you can come over to my apartment if you want to see it at some point. I can give you guys a private screening here.
That sounds like a plan.
Yeah, let's do it.
Jonathan Caouette, thank you very much.
Nice to meet you. Talk to you. Bye.